Don, I was pretty bullish this morning until I just paid attention to what you have on your chart there.
No, I mean, it doesn't really look too good, but it's not too bad, honestly.
It's green.
Yeah, I loved the celebration of the green candle.
That's a win nowadays. We'll take what we can get.
It's a big win. It's the first one in quite a while. We actually closed green. It's kind of funny though. Like we've been waiting for this green candle for 9 weeks, and then all we get is this. It's kind of sad, but
so beautiful.
It is what it is.
I'm just pulling up all the places this is supposed to go, and then I'll. I'm just
probably getting inside a month this month, right? I'd be quite surprised if it.
Yeah.
Yep, that's basically my view as well. Like very likely to just be boring, or up if the S&P allows. But who knows?
There's some mega options expiry thing with equities, right? So smart people posting about it.
I've heard about it, but I haven't looked into it actually.
Yes, what's the date on that? It's the quarterly expiry, and because open interest tends to just get bigger and bigger, it's like one of the largest ones. But I can't remember if it was
3.2 trillion, roughly 6% of the entire US equity market coming off in one day. June OPEX.
Yeah, but do you know what day it is?
Let me take a look.
I thought it was last Friday.
I think it's still coming, but
I think it's still coming.
Okay. Friday before each third Saturday in each month.
Solve the puzzle and you shall know the truth.
It's too early for that. By the way, man, I'll give it for the pre-show people, but it was legitimately maybe the most grandma possible thing I could have done. I was out of town this last week. Last thing I did as I was leaving town was walking in my bedroom to go get a charger or something. Slammed my knee into the corner of the bed, and it just dropped me.
Oh no!
It hard enough to just hit the ground, and it hurt for like 2 days. The first 2 days I was gone. It just like limpy type hurt. It was so bad. It hit me perfectly. I wasn't even walking fast or anything. Get home, probably second or third time I've been in my bedroom. My wife was going to bed, and the suitcase was like still on the floor. I turn off the lamp and walk the normal path in the dark, so like go back out to the living room.
Oh, surely not.
Hit the suitcase.
No.
Hit the floor, same knee, and then I'm just like in pieces. I mean, how do you fall like walking twice?
Down bad, literally.
In place. I'm not gonna make it into my 80s, man. I'll be a mess. I'll have torn every ligament.
Oof.
I don't know how.
But your job is so active and hands-on,
that I can't walk into my bedroom.
Anyway. I mean, I'd make fun of you, but like shit like that happens to me all the time. So I can't. It's just nope.
Yeah. All right. Tweets have been made and stuff, so we can do the live bit. Man. All right. I'm gonna maximize myself for a second, and we will start the show. Thanks for being here, everybody. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to Weekly Open. I'm Brian. We got Don and Cred on the way. Before we get to them, let's go straight to our partners at FTX. Go to weeklyopen.com/FTX, where you can trade today directly from one asset to the other. It's easy on the FTX app. If you think the bottom's in, you can make your buys there today directly from fiat. Connect your bank, DCA, whatever you think the right path is. You can do it on FTX. weeklyopen.com/FTX. Thanks to them for being our partners. Let's get to the show. Don, Cred, how you doing?
Pretty good. flying over to Austin tomorrow for consensus Texas things. So if you want a reason to be bullish, it's that I won't be at my desk. And that historically tends to coincide with quite favorable bits in the market. Classic, right? You're sat there spending 20-hour days staring at it. Nothing happens. The second you go for a walk or dare leave your desk, that's when all the volatility comes in. So that's about it. And it also looks like a pretty busy week headlines wise, just kind of looking at what DB tweeted. There's a Senate hearing on crypto's role, ransomware payments on Tuesday. Wednesday's got some panel. Thursday, ECB decisions, CPI on Friday. There's a lot going on, and I will not be there for any of it.
That's why you got to trade from your phone, man. That's what the pros do, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what you do, yes.
Don, how are you? Are you also going to be traveling this week?
No, I'll be around. I've been enjoying, I don't know, I've been burnt out by traveling too much, which is such a stupid thing to say, but it's kind of true. So I've just been like saying, okay, I'm going to stay home. Gonna enjoy kind of at least a little bit of a routine, get back into things, do sports properly again, that kind of stuff. So I'll be around.
I mean, that's not true, right? It's just because you broke even on your last trade, you need to make it all back in one trade. So you're just here hunting for anything green.
Of course.
Yeah, man. Well, I did not let a little bit of travel get in the way of myself over trading or being down bad or doing it on leverage. I've held a round trip, and I'll tell you, I'm back in profit, so I should now close because it was a terrible RR trade, and I kept it open anyway. But I was gone last week in Charleston and other bits of South Carolina, and had a great time. But I do feel you, Don, man. If you do a little bit of travel, you get back, and you're like, nice to be in your own place, your own sense of comfort and a little more chill, unless you're like me and hurting yourself, tripping in your own house. But we got our first Green Weekly, long awaited. We tried to manifest it so many times on this show. First Green Bitcoin Weekly. I noticed ETH didn't quite make it. I don't know if y'all saw that, but it was like a slightly red doji. So ETH got all the way to 10 weeks. Many other coins.
Is it 10 weeks? I thought it was 9 weeks as well. I think it started 1 week later. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
right.
6, 7,
So
8, 9. Yeah. So ETH just did the same thing Bitcoin did.
Late to the game by 1 week. Yeah.
Yep.
But we have a positive response on a Monday, going into a heavy news week and going into the most cringy crypto promotion conference of the year. So
is it that bad? It can't be worse than Miami, right? Miami is always the worst one.
Well, Miami's a Bitcoin conference, and this is a crypto conference.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think maybe this year, like all the disgust and sadness is baked in though. So maybe it'll be better. I don't know. I've never been. I'm just LARPing about what it's like. But I hope to see you there, Cred.
Oh yeah, we'll meet up for sure. We'll do the bossy dance to rescue the market.
Wow. I mean, that if we truly did that, I think it would. I think we'd go up $10,000 overnight.
We'll be the sacrifice ledger. It's fine. I'm becoming TikTok superstars in the process.
How many times do I have to sacrifice myself? I am not the WASI.
I know, it's outrageous, isn't it? I did the fitness Discord. I doxed myself. At least the market's going up since my dox. So you're welcome. The only price to pay is every time I open Twitter, someone's using my ugly mug as a reaction image, and I'm totally fine with that. It doesn't worry me at all. You
could be like Brad Pitt in crypto, and somebody will still like figure out a way to like use your image to make money consistently.
Invest are doing it half the time as well, which extra points in that department, I guess.
Did y'all get the mailed plushies from Wassiverse to you, by the way?
No, we're not important enough.
Yep, they're really good. I got a couple of them. I quite like them. I got a special place on my new bookshelf that's coming in. That'll be for those. All right, so let's talk about the market. Don, Green Weekly last week. Some people say these are a bullish inverted hammer. I've never really liked that candle pattern, but nevertheless, there we are.
Yeah.
And now we're green so far, but I don't know that we can make much of it yet. So what's the state of the market?
Yeah, I mean, nothing has really changed much. Someone in the chat has been saying, like, I expected more, or this is all we get. It's like super cope. But I was like talking about this candle. like this
Yeah.
candle that closed. Like all of us were looking at it and we were all like, okay, we want to see like a big candle to the upside, and this is the close that we got, which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
Can obviously still get like a good one the week after, which we kind of started off on a good note. But obviously, I mean, still running into resistance, right? So for me, nothing's really changed. I'm still like my hope is that we're doing the same thing that we did at the top of the range. I think like there's a world in which we're going to do it. It's just I don't want to be early to that trade. It's not for me. I'd much rather be the guy like the same thing that I did at 60K. I want to do here where we lost 60K, I sold. We gained back 35K. I'm going to buy back and be happy with it. So yeah, I think there's a world in which we kind of just engulf this candle close that we had, like all of the wick, and it just close into resistance and then actually just keep on marching up. It's still a resistance, right? And we're so close to resistance that it doesn't really make much sense for me to take any trades, because at that point, you're kind of just speculating on resistance to break, and I need more tests for that, right? So like if that level if you get rejected again, we go back down again, maybe do something like we did here, where we had like a spike and then another spike. So we go low and then spike up again. I could see myself longing into that resistance, but until then, I'm just going to be chilling. I tried my best. I wasn't enough. And now I'm just, maybe it's cope. I don't know. It's just like me taking a trade below range, low, doesn't make much sense to me at this point.
Well, that's the point of a system, right? You're still supposed to follow the system.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is encouraging to see kind of the early week stuff. One thing I was going to point out, just might as well, because I think we're pretty heavily correlated still, despite sometimes being the low time frame correlations have been a little weird. I mean, this is a pretty affirming kind of bullish consolidation after reversal type of thing for the S&P from a pure momentum perspective. Like these are a 4-hour time frame, so you're talking about trying to both put in reversal, higher high on low time frames, consolidation, potential continued move up, and on the daily time frame, it's showing that strength into the face of kind of that resistance. So this is, if you're going to buy resistance, like the type of thing that makes sense if you feel like a lot of the bad news is priced in, or like kind of just so much bearish sentiment that you think that there's more room for upside. The distance for mean reversion to the top has still got some room to go. Like I look at this from a traditional market point of view, and it doesn't like, I just feel like there's a decent amount of buying potential. I don't feel like it's so extended or so reverted to the upside that people are just begging to dump into it. I feel like the market is probably still pretty underowned. And so that whole, the idea of buying this resistance, even though it's, I mean, literally right here at this daily resistance here and this cluster from back here, it doesn't freak me out. But especially in the face of some other more macro-y stuff. Cred, what's your take on these things?
Yeah, I think I broadly agree with Don. Like, it may not feel super comfortable taking the move back inside the range setup because you feel late. But if you think about what happened at the range high, you probably felt late selling at, 58K, 56K, whatever it was, given the top was at 69K, right? And that can create some reluctance to take the trade. But the whole premise of the setup is that the breakdown failed and it's back inside the range. And that opens the door to targets which are big enough to where being late doesn't really matter, right? And that's kind of my perspective on the thing. So I take the monthly time frame breakdown pretty seriously. So I at least need the weekly time frame to play ball if I want to start punting risk at this type of stuff. I think there's a decent chance we get it, but it's definitely one of those I don't mind being late buying above resistance, because I think the move from that will be meaningful, rather than buying below resistance again, hoping that it breaks. Like that sort of 2 to 8% difference, whatever it may be, that's not kind of important enough for me to front run the setup
What's
becoming
the monthly
material.
level again that you're referencing?
Yeah, I can screen share this real quick. So where are we? Chrome tab. There we go.
Yeah, I'm just not sure if it's the 35K or whatever.
Sure. So, I
that
mean,
summer.
Don's got this entire consolidation. I think
Yeah.
that's totally reasonable, especially if you want to be slightly conservative with where the upper end of that is. All of that makes sense to me. I think the bare minimum, if I'm itching and scratching to get long, it's got to be through this lowest close level of the consolidation all the way back from the start of January 21. And we had the failed breakdown in the summer that got engulfed, and that was an awesome signal. I mean, this is like even a decent case study, right? If you're buying like the week after it closes like this, you probably feel pretty late at that point, because from the low to the high, you missed out on what, like at this case, it was a bit of an extreme one. It's like a 20% move, right? And you think, well, there's no way that's most of the move played out. Maybe it reverts, etc. But structurally, you can see it was a pretty good setup, and there was plenty of space for the market to continue once the signal was cemented. And I think we could get something. Or at least I'm waiting for something similar to emerge on the weekly time frame here. Not just kind of spike previous week's high and slow down into resistance or anything like that. That would suck. I do just want like a meaty weekly close through that level. And at that point, wherever that close might take place, just like theoretically, your invalidation, depending how tight you want to make it, you could just use the swing low. And then targets wise, I think a lot of reversion stuff lines up closer to 40K, depending on how you want to slice it. And that on its own doesn't look like an amazing setup. But first of all, 1.4, 1.5 R just on BTC USD, and especially on these conditions, that's pretty good. Like I personally won't shake a stick at that. I think lower risk reward stuff with higher probability is like an underrated thing to do in crypto in general. People always want like the 5-1, 6-1, super tight stop, whatever type of setup, even though the probability of those setups tends to be lower. I don't mind being a boomer and taking lower risk to reward setups. So I think the probability of success is higher. And also in the same vein, if this then acts as a broader risk on signal for the market for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it may be, you can always just turbocharge or juice your results by punting altcoins if you think Bitcoin is going to go up over the next whatever time period. And there's some decent kind of range low punts to be had on alts, which I'm sure we'll discuss. So for me, this is like the bare minimum, a weekly close back above resistance. And then, I don't think you have to overcomplicate it. It's pretty much the same standard setup than Don talked about. If the market tries to break a range, it doesn't go anywhere and it trades back within the range, even if you're late. Usually all the participation that took place below the range ends up being some sort of trap, deviation, forced sellers, unwilling sellers, whatever. And as they cover or buy back into the market, alongside the fresh momentum of people like me taking the setup that triggers as the market trades back within the range, you tend to get like a pretty material pop. For me, that's still very much worth waiting for. I know Don sometimes trades the setups where you like buy very discounted below the range low, hoping for at least a snapback. I'll do that periodically and maybe sometimes on lower time frames. But if I'm looking for higher time frame risk on, I do need like the close and for the setup to actually trigger on the time frame that I'm looking at, especially when the monthly looks so dodgy, Yeah,
this is giving me the hint of a idea here. Can you point back to what caused the resistance level between 41 and 42? Is that part of the monthly, or was that on your R setup there? You had a
I mean, I think it's a bunch of stuff. It's this kind of previous market structure level from this summer low, and where we kind of chopped around, overshot, and didn't do anything. I think Don's got a very similar cluster in that regard. And then if you add the cluster of booming moving averages or moving average memes, right, you can see they all kind of converge in this type of area. And again, even if you get a wick into there, that's still your reversion target met. So for me, those are sort of the parameters that I'm interested in. Reclaim the range low, that would suggest a larger reversion. Whereas the first meaningful obstacle for a larger reversion, 38 to 40.
Yeah, so you're in the weekly time frame there.
Yes.
When I add that to daily, and if we just kind of think of those levels in general, these kind of things interest me sometimes, is when you have so the 200-day moving average is in the same zone that you're talking about. What is 41.7 right now? It'll work its way down. Say it's 41, whatever. But when you have this kind of like all these daily closes here between 36 and 39, it always makes you realize like there's going to be a bunch of people looking at this chart right here. They're just looking at a daily chart and they're like, if it's here, ooh, should I be closing? And then it gets past it, gets them lured back in or something. And that's like ends up being kind of where you get knocked out. And so I could definitely believe in the scenario where you kind of overshoot through those daily things and then you get rejected above the round number, but like right there at the kind of clean weekly clusters that you're talking about, you know, the longer term daily moving average that people are going to be watching. I could really see that scenario. Like I would be very, very tempted to close here, and then I would be sitting here with it hovering below the 200-day, like this same idea, right, of the bullish resistance. That I'd be like, oh my gosh, what if we break above it?
Yeah, the dangerous type of thinking. But in general, I agree. Like that's just where it gets sticky, right? The previous floor, some reversion targets, just like on the way up on the first rally to like 44, 46, it wasn't like super clean. Just I think the 200-day was super clean on that occasion. But overall, like, you know, if I re-add these boomer levels, you can kind of see that it reached this box area of reversion where a ton of those moving averages overlapped. It wasn't like super clean, and you know, even the weekly closed above a few of them, hit the 200, closed below, whatever. But you can kind of just eyeball at that point, as I did, and you can whatever go on my Twitter. There's like there was the monthly mid range here, all the moving averages, and I kind of pay attention to that type of stuff when a lot of trading systems overlap and give you a kind of pretty ubiquitous or unambiguous reversion zone. I think being greedy in that area for the extra 2-3% just doesn't make a ton of sense. So for me, at least, if I get my weekly reclaim signal, I'll probably looking, if I manage to get long, I mean, consensus, all this other stuff. But yeah, in general, right, if we just eye test, re-add all of these, around 40 is where it ends up. And then taking your guidance on the daily time frame is just this pre-breakdown consolidation that, you know, nuked the market. You can just kind of X marks the spot type of thing for if we get a rally into here, that's where you start being careful. You get the round number or that type of stuff. That's when the trade becomes far less attractive from a risk to reward point of view at the very least, but also just probabilistically, because at that point you'd expect profit taking, right? Like virtually most trading systems, reversion targets will have been met in this area, be it a support resistance flipper or just like medium time frame following. And I don't want to be those guys exit liquidity with any fresh longs.
Yeah,
you know?
a lot of opportunity for distribution amongst technical traders. So you'd have to have fundamental stuff to push you beyond that, which is it makes it nice and clean. It gives you pretty good setup to your point about the low R, higher probability. Should we talk a bit about ETH because it has a lot of the same stuff? I think the levels are cleaner on Ethereum, even though the chart is uglier to me. But do y'all think this relatively the same principle is going to hold here? Like it would follow bullishly if Bitcoin does, or do you think the relative chart is wrecked, or what?
Yeah, go on, Don. What do you think of ETHUSD?
I mean, I think ETHUSD is at support, and I think it could bounce, right? But I think the relative chart is just fucked. It's getting closer to support, so it doesn't really make much sense to put on swing shorts necessarily. But like you look at this monthly chart, right? And I mean, the meme Head and Shoulders did its work. It went up, and now we have another meme Head and Shoulders at the highs, trading right at that low, obviously. And with a chart like that, especially given how this Head and Shoulders played out, I don't necessarily want to be in ETH if I can be in Bitcoin. I think this could easily just go back to support. So it's like, if that goes down to support, that's 20% down. And I could see that happening even if Bitcoin goes up, which means Bitcoin rallies for like 10, 20%. ETH doesn't do anything. And then at that point, we've had this before where Bitcoin rallied and then ETH didn't do anything. Bitcoin stopped that resistance and then ETH caught up. That kind of stuff I could play. Right here, it's not really on the relative pair. It's not really too interesting, just based on the fact that we're still not at weekly support, right? Even if you're like super, super generous, and you're saying, okay, the high of this candle close is weekly support, it's still not quite there. It's not as bad as it was. I mean, it's just 4 or 5% away, but I wouldn't want to necessarily front run this because this is one of the first lower highs that we've had, right? You can see how this has been just kind of steadily walking up. Same thing here, it's an equal high and didn't undercut the low. And now what we've done is we put in a high, we put in another high and a low in between that we undercut, right? So this is the first time that at least the lower or like the weekly time frame has changed trend. This is a downtrend. This has been a continuous uptrend for the last year or so. So I don't want to be front running. Not more than a year. It's been like that way since 2020. So I don't want to necessarily front run that. I don't really see the point, because you get like this kind of shift in momentum, and I tend to just stay away, because even though it's ETH, it's still an altcoin to me, and any altcoin can go down a lot. And if this goes down 60, 70, 80%, I don't want to be in it. And could I see a bounce from here into like resistance, into another lower high, into lower? Easily, right? Could I see like a 10% bounce or something? Yeah. But do I want to be trading into like this new regime where it's actually making lower highs, even though like there's so much hype going around? Not necessarily. And with regards to ETH,
I guess the merge.
Come again? Yeah, the merge. I mean, yeah, the hype is the merge. And I mean, it's a big fundamental event, and everyone talks about it, right? So I think it's justified in a sense, but it's just like the ETH BTC chart just doesn't look too pretty. ETH USD is holding support, right? And we've been talking about the support for quite a while. But it's still the same situation that we've had last week, where 1 test, 2 tests, 3 tests, 4 tests, 5 tests, and now we're kind of moving up. And it's like, do I really want to be buying this? I don't know. Could I see this go up towards like 2.4, 2.5 easily? I'd like this. Would make sense to me to bounce from support to resistance in the like 2.5K region, 2.4. But I don't need to be on that leg, honestly, especially with Bitcoin looking how it is, because there's also a chance that it just like flops, it goes down, goes towards like 1.2K. Even if it's bullish, right? I could see it like wick down just to take out all these lows and then be more attractive lower. So that ETH, like for Bitcoin, I get why people are getting FOMO. For ETH, it's a little bit difficult for me, especially given the support has just been tested over and over and over again.
Yeah, that quintuple bottom blows. I don't really like it. Maybe it's just coke. Maybe it's PTSD from, obvious levels historically, just getting at least poked and prodded, if not blown out completely. But it's not hugely compelling as a kind of macro bottom. As far as weekly signals, like I talked about BTC USD having to close back within the range to target a reversion. For ETH USD, for me, it needs to close above this highest close, and is essentially structurally the same level as BTC USD, like kind of a inflection point range level. In the summer, we closed below it, closed above, and that was the basis for a massive rally. At the moment, it seems to be resistance, but if I get a green close above it, I'm technically allowed to chase it up into, this area that Don mentioned. Could be as early as the highest close here, but in general, this kind of shelf of previous highs and the most recent pre-breakdown levels. Because it's ETH, maybe it spikes higher or whatever, which would be totally reasonable, like 26, 2700. And if we add the moving average memes, I think they converge slightly above the box, which makes sense. But on a closing basis, in this environment, the most I could reasonably play for is the reversion from closing above resistance back into where this stuff clusters together. Anything else from like a fresh trend point of view, or whatever else, it needs to like prove its case much more for that to be attractive. So I guess the TLDR of my view on the majors is rally good, rally still into weekly resistance, and the longs only become unlocked to me personally if this week breaks above the resistance levels that we're testing from the underside. Maybe that'll make me late. Maybe that'll make me FOMO. My entry will be worse than yours, whatever. But I just need the setup, especially in the context of both monthly timeframes just completely breaking down. I have no right front running even weekly setups when the monthly time frame is against me. It's just not. I don't think that's appropriate for my trading system.
Yeah, I think this makes sense. I think if you take the case of the rally in Bitcoin, it's then a determination of like, where does the ETH move peter out, and how does that impact the relative pair breakdown and what the dollar result is. If it's the ETH BTC ratio continues to do poorly, then you could imagine this kind of 2400, 2500 ETH USD area be where this trade stops, right? Where it gets gross. If that ETH BTC chart kind of goes back to its range and retests its like a higher side or gets rejected off that lower high that you talked about, Don, I could imagine the scenario in that case where like ETH goes all the way up here, basically the same place in terms of where it goes back to from a levels point of view as Bitcoin went to broke down from. But that gives you all the way back to 3K. Also, its 200-day moving average, which is the same thing it did on the bearish retest in April. Both of them went back to their 200-day moving averages almost perfectly. And
yeah, that makes sense.
And so like that's your ETH BTC reflexive rally in addition to the Bitcoin rally. Honestly, I think if that happens, that's probably going to make me more bearish overall, because it means like, you know, AVAX and Solana and Atom and everything else does the same thing. And I think this rally would be way more constructive if Bitcoin kind of ran solo on that rebound and you saw capital flying into harder money, if you will. Even if I personally think ETH is relatively hard money, versus those layer ones. But if ETH goes with BTC, then all the other alt layer ones will also probably mean revert pretty significantly.
The familiarity bid, it's the coins everyone knows, and they have a lot of liquidity, and it's what people are used to trading when they want to trade higher beta stuff to BTC and ETH. Right. And given the absence of new narratives, that they'll just punt those. Another thing on my radar in the context of what we're discussing is kind of S&P technical resistance-ish over the next week or two. It's this prior market structure level in this entire kind of consolidation. You could chop it down to more specific levels. For example, I know people don't like the big boxes for some reason, even though it's not a market that I trade specifically. If you want to do something like this, the prior range high and or the nearest lowest close around that type of area. Again, not a market that I trade, but market structure in general has been pretty constructive as far as the S&P 500 goes on the weekly time frame. I mean, this looks like hindsighting. This is something we wrote about in a different newsletter. I tweeted this out as well at the time when BTC was rallying. This thing is pretty clean from a weekly market structure type of perspective. So two things stand out to me. One is if the entire market rallies, I assume S&P 500 is going to be playing ball, and that's going to be into an area of weekly resistance where at least the risk reward as well as the probability become less attractive for continuation. And then what that means for crypto, I mean, if we look at recent evidence, we had coupling to the upside and to the downside, and then somewhat more recently, we had decoupling to the upside and coupling to the downside. Now it's a bit less clear. It's kind of all over the place. But until proven otherwise, I still think higher time frame S&P or NASDAQ, whatever market structure levels, are like a decent risk proxy. So if this starts to push next week, or even this week, I still have BTC pushing resistance from the underside, ETH pushing resistance-ish from the underside, and S&P doing the same thing. So I'd probably still want to see at least a move, kind of like a BTC setup on the S&P, right? A move back inside the range, and then there's plenty of space to catch up. But that's a discussion to be had in maybe 1 or 2 weeks when I can sit here and say, look, BTC reclaimed 34, ETH is above 2K, and the S&P looks like it failed the bearish retest, which is bullish. I think risk is really attractive over the next 1 to 4 weeks. That would be a much more compelling case than me sitting here saying BTC underside, ETH underside, S&P underside, but maybe it fails, So there's just a lot of stuff converging on weekly timeframes, and it doesn't quite allow me to punt from a multi-week perspective. Some altcoins look pretty decent.
I love your S&P squiggle there, because I had the same one drawn from last week or so, because I really think the S&P, I mean, it loves to just take its time distributing, right? There's a lot more money trying to fit through that exit, and the ability to kind of prop up the market is much stronger. And also the sentiment is just so bad. It seems very realistic to let it take its time. I think this is kind of the bearish version of it. Like, I think that it could easily get back to its 200-day, higher up into these levels, kind of chew out some of these levels, get people sweating, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that would be a very interesting thing to see how crypto handles the S&P spending all summer into the fall. going up or sideways, kind of climbing that wall of worry, if you will. I mean, did y'all see Cardi B asking when they're going to call the recession?
That was good. I love her commentary. I think there are two alt charts which don't look absolutely dead or appalling, and which have had relatively constructive weekly closes at important levels. And for me, those are Solana and AVAX and I think FTT. I know, who remembers that coin, right? And also, obviously, anything we have to say about FTT is super biased, and we're paid for shills because FTX supports the show. So I guess you can just disregard all of that. But Solana, AVAX has just been like a one-way road, turbo nuke everything. I think below this level, Suzu misclicks and deletes AVAX from his bio. So it really has to hold. And everything else that isn't, I mean, you can turn on log to cope if you want, but anything below this range, just I don't put a ton of stock into this consolidation. I mean, if I had to start hallucinating lines, maybe it'll be this prior range, which is like 50% lower. So as far as meaningful do or die levels go, I think this weekly range low around 20, 23 is pretty decent. And the weekly closes have been rather constructive, and there's been quite a fair bit of absorption going on lower timeframes at this important level. I mean, just basic eye test one here kind of tells the story as well. So that to me is reasonable. Like if you want to be front running and punting constructive weekly closes and whatever else, at least this is above support, not below it, which is nice. And look, even like a basic trade from support to resistance, that's like 60%, or even if you want to be super conservative and take it to the range midpoint, there's like 25, 30% there, depending on where you do business. This is not the worst thing in the world if you are going to punt risk. You might as well do it with stuff that's at support, not below support. And in a similar vein, as far as decently constructive / cope weekly closes, I think FTT belongs in that category, wherever I've put it. I can't see it. I'm just going to type it in. FTT perp. There we go. I mean, the fundamentals, whatever. I think early cycle punting exchange coins is really good because the narrative is just so brain dead. Like high cap, liquid, more users, bigger burns, doesn't take much thinking. So I kind of like that in general for like the future. But if we go as far as weekly closes, it's a very similar story. This is really the only high time frame support that you've got, and thus far it's been decently constructive on a closing basis. I mean, trying to trade this perp is an absolute nightmare. It's literally you against Trabuco. It's not much fun at all. But structurally, I think I've got BTC, ETH, S&P below weeklies, which sucks. But if you're going to front run risk, AVAX, FTT are at least holding their weekly levels. So I'd be looking at stuff which is held up decently.
It reminds me quite a lot of the old BNB prior bear market, like structureless chart, that just held up for a long time and then reverse when it looks the worst. And it looks that way again, honestly, but they don't even have it's hard to get back to that old BNB chart. But I mean, it just looks like this extraordinarily long distribution. And I've always found the exchange coins, one, impossible to trade because I don't have access to them, but two, impossible to trade because unless you're playing that kind of pure level candle structure, they have so much space underneath them because they have you see exactly what I'm talking about. That July, maybe that was the bullish setup. Anyway, it's just I find them difficult, and because in those you're also dealing with people's view of their real businesses. So like the chart can look bad, but the business looks good, type of thing. But
yeah, I agree with that. There's certainly some idiosyncrasies. It's much preferred for me as an early cycle type of thing. But exchanges, if they're going to like 10x their users and retail comes back, and in the absence of us coming up with new cope, new narratives, and new shiny things, I think they make for a pretty good starting point. Especially if you expect the exchange to like stick around and their marketing budgets are higher and whatever else. I mentioned Solana. Sorry, I mentioned AVAX, so I kind of have to mention Solana as well. For me, it's closed back within its weekly range. I know you could have this entire kind of upper candle structure as support, but it sort of leads you to a similar conclusion of the weekly closes have been below support. So I'd need a weekly at least back above whatever this is, 46.50. And then there's actually a decent chunk of space to even take it to like a bearish retest level up at 78. I mean, on a pure level to level measurement, which isn't always accurate because your entry won't necessarily be at the level. There's again, 50, 60% available once you get some evidence of weekly strength. So there are some things cooking under the hood. Just for me, in most cases, I need the higher time frame weeklies to play ball, and then I think we can start talking about filling in a lot of these weeks of pain.
Yeah, I found the old BNB one, by the way. So it's not perfect, but if you recall, this is at the same time that Bitcoin was doing the like 6K thing, and BNB was just here like distributing close enough to its highs. Like its all-time high was like this 2-week period. So it's like its tight range was this very, very different structure than Bitcoin's. And then it had 2 weeks of breakdown and then up only after that. But just in general, this whole bear market version of the BNB chart was so much different, because look at it throughout 2019, when Bitcoin was hovering 4K and BNB was like 10xing.
It's the Chainlink special, right?
It is. It's just one of those. It was tough to analyze. Don, you may be away from the computer. I'm not quite sure.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
He's just shaking his head at me saying some altcoins on the weekly could potentially do something.
Well, from a sentiment perspective, I don't know if y'all saw my little Twitter poll I did. I was like, is Solana going back to the infamous $3 level? And over 62% of people said either all the way to $3, which was a lot. It was like 35-40%. And then another big group said close enough, sub 10. And it's up 15% since then. I didn't say time frame or anything, and it could be right, but it definitely was a sign, because you say anything like that back while Solana has any structure whatsoever, and people think you're the craziest person of all time, and now the majority is with you. Definitely a sign that sentiment is fully shifted on the coin.
Don, do you like any alts here?
I mean, I'm seeing what you're seeing. Basically, it's just, for me, what I kind of expect is, I mean, we can look at Solana, and I actually drew out something like a couple of days ago, which is basically this. I mean, it's not necessarily one-to-one how I'm expecting it, but I legitimately think like this reminds me of 2018, right? And even if we do like rally through resistance, I think the same is probably going to play out regardless. So I think like in general, there's no rush for these. You can buy them and 2x or 3x, but I think in general they're so broken that there's a good chance they just keep on going down, even from this point, like 60, 70, 80%. And then you get amazing buys, right? I'm not exactly like, I'd be very surprised if we get below $4. I think even this is like too aggressive. Whenever you have these kind of charts, you usually stop, like make long-term bottoms at random places like this, for example, like at 8 or 9. Which would put it down like roughly the same as ETH went down, right? You look at Solana, which is down like at that point, down 95, 96%. And
it's already down ETH, half the time, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, when you're talking about Solana being down 90%, you're talking about the network, not the price. But yeah, you look at ETH, and no matter how good you think a coin is, right? I think any altcoin can go through this. So I'm going to be interested in Solana when it's down like roughly the same as ETH was. Doesn't have to play out that way. And I think there's, like you mentioned, there's like a 2x possibility here, which I don't want to discount. Like that's a lot of money to be made, right? But it's trading right into resistance, right? The only thing is it's been nonstop down since $134, just like straight up only down, which makes like the mean reversion kind of trade really attractive to a lot of people. So I could see like a bunch of people kind of piling into this, but I'm just not bullish. Like
I
the
think
altcoin,
it has to clear like this $47, maybe $50 level, and then it slams into 75 to 80.
Yes,
I
like
honestly think anyone,
this seems likely.
Yeah, anyone with vested coins. And to be fair, I have some Solana that I would be perfectly willing to sell between anywhere 75. That 115 level, that kind of price resistance is legitimately a gift. And I think you'll find lots and lots of seller potential at those levels. And I don't think they would hesitate. There are so many.
Go on.
Yeah, so many unlocks and VCs that maintain exposure to these, and they're in massive profit, and they'd be happy to sell to you. Honestly, they're probably happy to sell to you at $50, but they'll definitely be happy to sell to you at $80, and they'll be ecstatic to sell it to you at $115.
Yeah, I think that speaks to a broader point that until proven otherwise, it's probably reasonable to assume that bounces we get are mean reverting and not trend forming. But if you don't have that higher time frame perspective, that's how you kind of get trapped as the market reaches into those higher time frame reversion levels. You kind of treat it like you would trade a new trend. But I just think purely from even a time perspective, it's still my prevailing view is that we're still in a reversionary environment and not like a new trend forming environment. It sort of reminds me of the chat we had Ledger on Spaces when the market was like creeping back up on the CME rally when it made that fake / real all-time high over 60K. And my main reservation, it wasn't like technical, it wasn't fundamental, it was time-based, right? I'm like, Ledger, are we really going to run it back all over again? Like, has it been long enough? Has the pullback to 30K, which, that just lasted a few months, was that really enough? Was that the bear market? And so we like to look at price, we like to look at levels, but also just from a cycle and psychology perspective, you need to consider time. And I still think there's, even without mentioning macro, it's very likely that we're going to be in this type of regime for a bit longer at least.
I still like to think essentially as the Coinbase IPO top as the real top for Bitcoin. And I feel like that secondary all-time high was just a sign of how much retail needed to be washed out, because I think retail is what really took it to that new all-time high and new price exploration. I don't think the market was totally, like, especially the bigger players in the market were as supportive of that. It just happened. And you ended up with this, because there were a lot of fractures in the market prior. It reminds me a good bit, and obviously we had a bunch happen since then, but the volatility blow up in the S&P in February of 2018. And then it just like climbed back and it went to all-time highs, and things were still kind of crazy after that. But the market kind of broke in February 2018. Like, it was a sign that something was wrong. So even though you have price exploration, even though you have new all-time highs, like, it still felt weird after the Coinbase 64K top. Yeah. And it was just this massive markup and distribution cycle that like propped up alts and took the majors to all-time highs, but the majors all-time highs just weren't very impressive. And it feels like we've been in some kind of distribution / bear pretty much ever since.
And Don's got some homebrewed FUD for us here, some fractal FUD.
Yeah, it's like, it's pretty much, it feels the same, it plays out the same. I don't know, like the ETH and Solana comparison is just an easy one to make, right? You have a high, you have a lower high, you have structure that just completely nukes, and then you go down. And it's actually funny because like Solana, you can see it like here on the comparison, like you had Solana just find shelf and then completely, not Solana, ETH, find this shelf and then completely nuke. And that was actually the bottom for ETH, around like $80. And that would put, like, if you compare it to like Solana, roughly that put it and into like the $15-16 range. If you're like very, very generous on the percentage terms. I could easily see that, honestly. It kind of undercut the previous range as well. Doesn't have to play out the same. The markets are very, very different now than they were back then. But I think you can roughly compare the two. Like, ETH wasn't really usable in 2018 either. Pretty much the same with Solana right now, where it's down a lot. So yeah, this is kind of what I look for in altcoins.
If you do get the 95%, that's your $10 to $12 range. I don't want to like just assume that Solana will stop at 95% because ETH did. In the case, if there's a long bear market in the same, you know what I mean. I think when that actually gets to that point, you'll be able to make plenty of enough of a case to say like, okay, well, Solana's not in the same place Ethereum was. There's a lot of dynamics, whether it's the coins that are built on it, the like new teams that, because all their stuff got decimated. New stuff has to come along. New reasons to use Solana has to come along. Maybe the Solana fundamentals suddenly are not as strong when the price is down 95%.
Okay,
I
Ledger,
don't.
that's just mid-wittery, right? So what's going to happen is if it nukes much further into those nice low round numbers, like unit size bias takes over, and you just start buying Solana because it's like, well, you know, if it's $10 to $15, wow, I can buy so many coins for whatever less amount of dollars, and
And that's why
you go into scratch card mode, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, honestly, that people could still be down pretty bad. Like, it could have to reaccumulate for a really long time, and if you're doing it at 10 to 15, if it gets down to 3 to 5 or something like that, like, you could be long term making a great trade, but still be hurting for like a year. Imagine, especially if like Bitcoin and Ethereum bottom and revert to the upside, and you're still saying like when Solana, and you're doubting what is Solana ETH or is Solana EOS. Like, that's in your head every single day. I could just imagine the scenario.
That's awesome. It's like the Solana ecosystem, a lot of it sucks as well. Like the coins that were launched on it, like the Sam Coins meme and the whole template of CMS, Alameda, and Sino Global, mega high FDV, perps get listed, down only, piece of shit project. And, you know, that's just not good for the layer that, like the protocol or the token that they're built on. So hopefully, if this thing survives, and next cycle, as always, people are going to want to build on the L1 that's doing well, doing, you know, price wise, and attracting builders and making Solana natives wealthy. Hopefully, we get some better tokenomics, better projects, and better coins, because this time around it was an absolute pillaging, you know.
But I mean, it just goes to kind of remind me of ICOs in 2017, 18, right?
Oh, yeah.
The biggest garbage got launched on ETH. And I mean, ETH was just used to like fund these complete and utter garbage projects. And then ETH didn't really work because you had so many ICOs launched that the entire network just basically collapsed. And you had like to have these huge gas wars. And ETH was just a pile of shit. And the projects on ETH were a pile of shit. And then it took one bear market and we got DeFi, which, I mean, arguably price-wise hasn't been doing too well, but it's much, much better than the ICO hype. And I think it's going to be the same with Solana, most likely. But obviously depends on how long the bear market gets drawn out, right? If the bear market is too long, there's a chance that even like bigger coins like Solana die, but I'd be very, very surprised. I think it's too big at this point to not make it into next cycle. Not too big to fail, because I think like any altcoin, even ETH, can fail. I think it's not too big to fail, but I think too big to not make it into next cycle is fair to say for both ETH and Solana.
Its community seems a bit more sticky as well, right? Like NFTs on Solana compared to like every other layer one are doing well. People are building their brand on Solana, and just like Solana influencers and .sol, like that whole kind of cultural penetration to the space generally improves the likelihood or probability of longevity from cycle to cycle. So that's kind of maybe a distinguishing point. Maybe cope, but I think there's something there. There's like a cultural phenomenon, you know? They're
doing the rotations of like which sectors, which types of things are interesting. That's all good. I completely agree. Can we finish on the Dixie? Because we have to talk about it every week now.
Yes. The Ledger Box redemption arc.
The Ledger Box redemption arc, the time spent above the box was very, very low. And I think in a vacuum, you could look at this and say it doesn't look great, right? Like, looks relatively weak, but I think at minimum, this supports our kind of bear market rally / longer distribution, you know, stuff crawls up before it goes lower later, because I think this could spend legitimately months basically with, you know, 100 to 103 and not telling us very much before it chooses whether it wants to be a full cycle to the downside, you know, Fed pivot, if you will, or if the macro stays weak and dollar gets strong and inflation gets tampered down, and you know, the dollar wrecks everything, goes to 120. I just think it's going to take some time, but this has lots and lots and lots of signs of wanting to stop. In my mind, the parabola looks very weak. It looks like it's making like a pretty weak lower high, whichever time frame I go to look at it. I'm not like in love with it. Seems like it wants to range in the box to me. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that at all. We have to, you know, as you mentioned last time, is it dollar weakness? Is it being euro driven? Does any of that matter? Do we have any predictive power over it, or what and whatnot? The signal I'm looking for from a macro point of view, it's really two things. Some sort of softening in the Fed's position would be welcome. That doesn't seem imminently obvious to me. And the second one, as I discussed with Don on elsewhere, crypto companies are seemingly being quite defensive from a cyclical standpoint, with like hiring freezes and whatever else. Same with miners. With energy costs going up, they're just like selling more Bitcoin than they have in the past. Could that be bottom things? Yes, absolutely. But it seems that these big companies with better information and the view of the flows than we have, they're not betting on retail coming back anytime soon. That still means you can get really good, for us as traders, mean reversions. But as far as new trend, higher time frame stuff, I think it's probably early. So I agree with you. Like dollar cooling off, rally in equities, that type of thing lends itself really well to a reversion, the type that we haven't had over the last 8, 9, 10 weeks, however long it's been. But should the market starts to bounce, as a trader, I'm going to look to take a lot of the setups we've discussed. But as someone who wants to, like, in terms of keeping allocation in the space or spot holdings or whatever else, I'll probably still be defensive unless the technicals really start screaming at me.
So a podcast I listened to was agreeing with you, and what they pointed to was actually the USD JPY, which is the second or third holding of the Dixie, is already basically back at the highs, and they kind of treated that as indicative of what can happen from here. And yes, to your point, like just a dead cat bounce off the euro. That's definitely the case for Dixie continuation, and Wreck Everyone don't have much of a balance, like certainly amongst like higher risk. I just think it might take its time is all, but I think all of that is really, really well put. All of it is also indicative for me of why I don't have a ton of faith in the down the risk curve stuff. I feel like, is retail really going to come buy your bags when they're paying $5 a gallon gasoline? Like, probably not.
They better. Is there anything in the NFT space, Ledger, from Flip or just flows you're observing that suggests broader brush gambling as opposed to specific collections?
Well,
just
definitely broader brush gambling, but I think it's rich people gambling in like the wrecked meme stuff. So like your goblins and wrecked guys, and like already a dozen goblin derivatives, which I think is not healthy for the NFT market. It's like obviously not quality, even though one of them may pop out and last for a while. I think it's wealthy people who are complacent that something will do well in the NFT market in the same way that it's always done well in their short history of success. And I don't think that's likely to end in a great way.
Yeah, Don, you made this argument, right? That when you see just pure copycat, cheap knockoff proliferations, that's not exactly the best signal.
Yeah, and in general, like my view on the NFT market is pretty much the same thing that just been saying, which is, I mean, I don't really see retail come in and buy like JPEGs while they're worried about gas prices, while they're worried about all of this shit. That's why I'm also like for the altcoins, like while you can easily get illiquid like 2x pumps, I don't think there's gonna be like an old season or anything of the sort. I think we're kind of through that. We're basically playing the playbook that we've done in the past, which is brutal downside followed by hilarious bounces where people just kind of get back on board, and then it's brutal downside again. And I think it's probably going to be the same for NFTs once the rich people, and I mean NFTs have made a bunch of people really rich, start losing enough that they care, because they still have so much that I think they haven't really realized how shitty the market has become. And at some point they're going to, and then it's gonna be the same trading environment than altcoins have been, I think.
Can I leave us with a terrible take?
I love terrible takes.
So my terrible take is one of the things I want to buy. So Don and I have discussed this at length in terms of when you think the market has bottomed, but before all the fancy new narrative shiny stuff comes out, you kind of buy, if you're conservative, BTC, ETH, like maybe Sol, maybe exchange coins, if you think those are like some low-hanging fruit type of things narratively. And then you see what the next cycle's shiny toys are, and you pile into those because there's novelty, there's hype, there's momentum, there's no cynicism or bag holders selling on every pump. It's just better, right? Starting fresh. One of the things that I'll be looking to buy, at least some of, is Richard Hart's Pulse X Layer 1 thing, which is a terrible idea. But fundamentally, I think if we reach similar, if we approach similar levels of like retail fervor and falling for like not so great but well marketed, hyped, and lowest common denominator appeal type of stuff, his type of marketing and people looking at Hex's past performance, correctly or not, as they say, scams pump the hardest sort of thing. I'll pump at least some Pulse X as a Layer 1 Richard Hart retail Lambo biggest diamond in the world revival trade. I won't love it. I'll probably hate myself and not sleep at night. Don will stop talking to me. Our joint YouTube channel is going to die. We'll get into a big nasty Twitter fight very publicly. But that's on my list, believe it or not. So
this is the kind of take that you just leave in private chat rooms. This is not something you say publicly. It's the biggest scam.
I mean, look, my face is all over my Twitter replies now. I've lost all shame or sense of decorum. It's over.
I mean, probably right. I mean, 99% of the time you're going to lose all your money. 1% of the time he's actually going to allow you to sell. But
this time it's different, bro.
Yeah. But what I want to say to that is obviously, I mean, when you're buying this kind of garbage, this has to be a trade, right? If any of you guys buys this shit and thinks it's for the long term, I'm gonna come to your place and rip your head off.
That's hot.
Harsh but fair.
No, everyone's gonna buy it after that threat.
I mean, I legitimately hope it goes to zero. And I hope that he goes broke and gets sued and goes to jail. He's a scammer.
But can I sell first?
Yeah, I mean, Cred, I think your point is warranted. This is my own problem. I have an issue where I can buy stuff that's goofy and I don't think is the next Bitcoin, but I have a hard time buying something when I know kind of the origin is just not good. You know what I mean? Like, it's just everything about it is just, it has terrible outcomes written on it. And
fair enough.
Even if it goes up a lot, or Pulse chain is the next Tron, if you will.
I'm too mercenary and too stupid. For me, it'll be just like I only really care about. I mean, I've got longer term views on the space, but when my trader hat is on, it's about like hype, liquidity, momentum, line make, boing, number go up, sell type of thing. And I think there's a chance that if his timing is right and the marketing sticks and there's this kind of perfect storm type of thing, and PTSD from people missing out on Hex, or at least missing out on the returns on Hex despite knowing that it's not exactly the most sound project in the world, that there's probably something there where I'll throw scratch card money at it and see if his quote-unquote viral marketing lets me buy support, sell resistance. It's dirty, it's disgusting, I'm a bad person, but as I said, I'm going to leave you with a terrible take.
That's fine. I like to hear it. Just as an aside, you're talking about specifically like which kind of NFTs are making these types of moves. We got the various Goblin clones. There's Elf Town, I'll Poop It, Goblin Girls, McGoblin, Wrecked Guy, buy this NFT or I'll do it, which is to cut off his member.
Take it to zero. Holy shit.
Hobo Town, Zombies Town.
Zero.
Croquet Club. I don't know what that is.
We should launch an NFT like that. Literally call it Take It to Zero.
There's There's one of them that's been moving. That's it's the opposite of that. It's one ETH floor is guaranteed or something like that. That's the name of it.
Oh God, end me. This space.
Leave me alone. NFT. We are all going to die has been one of the top ones that's got.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, that's
so anyway, pretty fun. Yeah. What else? Anything y'all want to leave us with, Don?
No, I think it's going to be important to kind of be at your desk in the next week.
Oh, great.
And I'm like only like 50% saying that because I want to annoy Cred, but I think it's going to be an interesting week. If we actually
Big week.
big week coming, yeah. Because the thing is, like, whenever you have these kind of ugly candles into resistance, right, and they immediately reject, when the weekly candle afterwards is as strong as the one that we have right now, right? There is like this kind of setup happens oftentimes when it actually wants to break resistance. Sorry about that. The phone's ringing.
It's Richard Hart.
Threatening me to take it back. No, but like in these kind of instances, there's actually like, this is not the worst setup to break the resistance. I'm just like, I'm not willing to play it. But if it does break the resistance this week, you're going to have to be there and actually make tough decisions. So might as well just like prepare for like either the breakout here or the breakdown, because I don't think this is going to be like one of the ones where we spend like 12 weeks or something down here. I think it's either going to be like a week or two max where we're going to actually break out or break down. And then you're going to have to make choices either way. Like, I don't think it's going to take much longer to be interesting again. So what I kind of want to end up on is basically look at the market. It's boring. It's kind of shitty, but I think it's getting better. I'm not entirely sure if it's to the upside or the downside, but both are a buy. So I might as well have your eyes on it.
If we were smart, we would trade volatility, but we're stupid, so we're gonna have to do candlestick, Bitcoin, weekly close type of stuff, you know?
Yeah, I did mention last night, I actually think options are a pretty reasonable way to attack risk in this market. I think they'd probably work all right. Somebody in the chat is telling me that apparently I have a honorary of the that whatever that collection's called. I can't remember the name. Which one?
Wow, nice show, Ledger. Not disclosing. Tut.
Someone
tag Zach XBT. The entire point of the show.
I'll do it. The one where they're cutting off their member. There's an honorary of me apparently.
So you got an honorary NFT of a collection which is premised on someone cutting off their penis. Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. I mean, that's totally reasonable.
Very valuable, I'm sure.
This is the kind of value buys Don always piles into, you know, as a value investor. That
all in
really attractive.
Yeah. All right.
Someone said up or down, basically, and I mean, yeah, I guess like that's up or down. You can basically trade. When it's sideways, you can't. So I'm saying you will be able to trade.
I'll say up. I think we have a week or two of like decently solid up moves on Bitcoin, maybe ETH. Disappointing relative trades.
I mean, hey, if that means we get some open bars at Consensus Ledger, if the market's up a bit over the next couple of weeks, I'm all for it.
We need people to loosen up so that we can have,
have
a couple of beers and actually afford them because they're free.
Excellent.
All right. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate y'all. Hope you have a great one. Safe travels to you, Cred. And thanks to our partners over at FTX. Go to weeklyopen.com/FTX, where you can trade today directly from one asset to the other. You can dollar cost average in, dollar cost average out, whatever you've got on your mind, you can do it at FTX. weeklyopen.com/FTX. Of course, 0 fees and track your portfolios you've always known and loved. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.